What if one knock on a door could change everything? Imagine a man who built walls of glass and steel around his heart, believing success meant never needing anyone. Then, one rainy night, a little girl stood trembling at his doorstep, clutching a worn teddy bear. Her voice was small, but carried the weight of a lifetime. "Mom just died. You're my dad." In that single moment, his world shattered and began again. This is not just a story about wealth, but Ab Christian Miller's life was the kind of existence that looked flawless from the outside, but hollow from within. His penthouse soared above downtown Seattle, its walls made of glass that reflected the glittering skyline, but never let anything warm settle inside. The place was sleek, immaculate, and silent, not because he loved order, but because there was nothing alive enough to disturb it. No laughter, no photos of family on the shelves, just polished surfaces and a kind of emptiness that echoed back at him whenever he moved through the rooms. For years, Christian prided himself on efficiency. Breakfast meetings at dawn, boardroom decisions sharpened like blades, a phone that never rang with personal calls. Vulnerability was an inconvenience he traded away long ago. He believed success was about control, about never leaving space for mistakes or attachments. So when he poured himself a late-night drink to mark the end of another week, he had no idea that his carefully structured fortress was about to collapse with the softest of sounds to knock. It was not the knock of delivery staff or security. No one simply appeared at his door. This knock was timid, almost fragile, yet it carried a persistence that unsettled him. He frowned, checked the monitor, and froze. Standing there was a little girl, no more than 6, drenched by the rain, clutching a faded teddy bear in one hand and an envelope in the other. When Christian opened the door, the girl looked up at him with eyes impossibly large and impossibly blue, her thin coat plastered to her frame. "My mom just died," she said with a calmness that made the words cut deeper. Then she lifted the letter toward him. "She told me if anything happened, I should find you. You're my dad." Christian's world stuttered. The air between them seemed to shift, dense and unfamiliar. For a man who thrived on certainty, those 5 words made no sense. He tried to argue with reality, to dismiss it as a mistake, but his name was right there on the soaked envelope, written in a hand he once knew by heart. Samantha Andrews. The name was a ghost pulled from another lifetime. Memories of her laughter in a London cafe, the way autumn sunlight had turned her hair into fire, her fierce debates about climate policy. They slammed into him before he could stop them. Samantha had disappeared years ago, vanishing from his life without a reason. And now, this child was standing in her place. Christian staggered back, trying to breathe against the sudden weight of grief and guilt. The girl trembled, though not from the storm. Her small voice was steady, in the way children sometimes are when the world has already broken them. He could not move, not until another presence stepped into view. A woman in her 40s, carrying an umbrella and a clipboard, introduced herself gently. "Mr. Miller, I'm Nancy Rollins from Washington State Family Services. This is Lily Andrews. Her mother passed away after a long battle with cancer. She asked to come here. Samantha believed you had the right to know."
"What have you done?"
Nancy's tone was calm, but the truth hit like a blow. Christian's heart pounded, his voice stuck in his throat. Behind him, the penthouse glimmered with sterile precision. Before him, a child soaked by rain carried the legacy of a woman he had once loved. When he finally stepped aside, guilt clamped down like a vice. Lily's wet shoes left tiny prints across his spotless floor, fragile marks of life in a space that had forgotten it. She perched carefully on the edge of his leather sofa, as if afraid her small weight might shatter something.
"Here is your document."
Nancy opened a folder and laid documents across the counter. Samantha's death certificate, a notarized statement naming Christian as Lily's biological father, and then the letter. Christian's hands shook as he unfolded it. "Christian," it began, the handwriting instantly recognizable. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I never meant to keep her from you forever. I thought it was too late. But now Lily needs someone who will not leave, someone who will fight for her. You always fought for what mattered. I hope she can be one of those things. I hope you can love her like I did, Sam." The words blurred as his eyes filled. He turned toward the rain-smeared windows, as if the storm outside could disguise the storm within. But Lily sat quietly on the couch, hugging her bear as though it carried the last warmth of her mother. She did not cry, she did not plead, she simply waited. When Nancy eventually rose to leave, She reminded him, "I'll be back in 48 hours. You can call me anytime. She has no other family." The door closed and silence fell. Yet it was not the silence Christian had known for years. This silence throbbed with something alive, raw, and urgent. When Lily asked in a whisper, "Can I sit here until the rain stops?" he found himself saying yes, though his voice was unsteady. It was the smallest agreement, but it cracked something open.
I guess so.
For the first time in years, his fortress no longer felt indestructible. It felt fragile, and within that fragility, a new possibility stirred. Later that night, Christian sat at the kitchen island staring at the letter. He thought about Samantha, about choices made and years lost, about the child who now carried both her face and his silence. The penthouse walls still gleamed, but for the first time, they no longer seemed to reflect success. They reflected the emptiness of a man who had closed too many doors. And yet, across the room, Lily sat curled on the couch, tracing circles on her teddy bear's ear, a presence small but undeniable. She was not asking for riches or explanations, only space. Only a chance not to be alone. Christian realized with a sharp, unfamiliar ache that perhaps he had been waiting too. Waiting for a knock that would force him to remember he was still human. Waiting for someone to remind him that success without connection was only another kind of failure. And that night, with the storm raging outside and Samantha's words echoing in his mind, he allowed the smallest seed of change to take root. It was awkward, terrifying, and far from complete. But it was there. For the first time in years, the silence inside Christian Miller's penthouse did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something steady, uncertain, but alive. Christian could not sleep that night. The letter from Samantha lay unfolded on the counter, its edges damp from his trembling fingers. He stared at the familiar script until the words blurred, not because he did not understand them, but because he understood them too well. For years, he had buried every memory of her, convincing himself that she was a closed chapter. Now her voice returned from beyond the grave, carried in ink and in the eyes of the child asleep in his guest room. When dawn crept through the skyline, he was still sitting in the dark. His penthouse felt changed, not physically but in weight. Every surface carried the reminder of what he had lost and what now stood before him. He could hear Lily shifting in her sleep, a sound so soft yet louder than the hum of all his machines combined. By morning, curiosity and dread collided. As he sorted through unopened mail stacked in forgotten piles, he found an envelope yellowed with time. The handwriting stopped him cold.
I hope we can
Samantha.
make this work.
His breath caught. With hands that shook, he tore it open. The letter was dated almost 6
Did she ever
years
talk
ago,
about me, your
long
mother?
before cancer, long before the knock on his door. "Christian, I know this isn't the way you deserve to find out, but I'm pregnant. The child is yours. I don't expect anything from you. I only wanted you to know, in case one day she ever looks for you." The words struck like a blade. He had been told he just never listened. The realization hollowed him out. He had been too consumed with quarterly reports, board meetings, and flights across continents to notice what truly mattered. His empire had been built on precision, but he had missed the one message that could have altered his life forever. The truth had been in his hands, and he had left it sealed. Later that morning, while Lily sipped hot chocolate with marshmallows, the first gentle request she had made Christian sat across from her, his mind unraveling. She did not know he had failed before he even began. She only swung her legs off the chair, quiet, watchful, holding onto her teddy bear like it contained her mother's last heartbeat. "Did your mom ever talk about me?" he asked hesitantly. Lily nodded. "Sometimes. She said you were smart, like build a robot smart, but that you were scared of hearts." The phrase hit him harder than any corporate battle. Scared of hearts. Samantha had always been able to see through him, and now her daughter repeated it without judgment. His throat tightened as he whispered, "Maybe she was right." The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. Lily's small presence pressed against the edges of his solitude, forcing cracks to appear in walls he thought unbreakable. That evening, while Lily curled on the couch, Christian found himself searching online. He typed Samantha's name, hesitant, afraid of what he might uncover. After minutes of digging, he found Iton's old blog, plain in design, titled "Raising Light in the Dark." He clicked the first entry. "She's here." She has his jawline and his stubborn frown. "The nurses say she's perfect. I believe them. I just wish he knew." Post after post unfolded like a time capsule. First steps, first words, tantrums, days filled with exhaustion and pride. Samantha had written as if she were speaking to him, though she never sent the words. She never poisoned Lily's view of him. Instead, she described him with quiet hope, always leaving room for the possibility that he might return. Then he reached the final entry, posted weeks before her death. If you are reading this, Christian, I am gone. I told Lily the truth in pieces. I want her to believe in you, to know that people may leave, but love does not. Please do not let her grow up thinking she is alone. The words undid him. For the first time in decades, Christian pressed his palms to his face and wept. Not the restrained tears of a man in control, but the raw, shaking grief of someone who had finally realized what he had missed. Later, as he tried to compose himself, Lily wandered over with a drawing. On the page was a stick figure family, a tall man with a frown, a woman with a halo, and a little girl holding both their hands. "This is us," she said simply. Christian's chest ached as he nodded, unable to speak. The following day, he drove to Tacoma to the address listed in Samantha's documents. It was a modest duplex behind a shuttered bakery, the kind of place he had never set foot in during his years of luxury. An older woman, Mrs. Marquez, answered the door. She looked him over with eyes that judged and forgave all at once. "She lived here," the woman said. "Quiet, hard-working, tutored my grandson in science when I couldn't afford a tutor. She never complained, but she looked tired, always tired." Christian swallowed hard. He had been in boardrooms while Samantha had been cleaning offices at night, homeschooling Lily by day, holding the world together with nothing but sheer willpower. Marquez led him to what had been Lily's room. The walls were painted sky blue with glow-in-the-dark stars still clinging to the ceiling. A small bookcase stood neatly arranged with titles in Samantha's handwriting. First Words Bug Encyclopedia, Astronomy for Kids. On the wall, a child's drawing remained taped in place. A family holding hands, simple yet powerful. Christian stood staring, every breath heavier than the last. Back in Seattle, his penthouse no longer felt untouched. Every corner now carried echoes of Samantha's sacrifice and Lily's resilience. At night, when Lily hummed a tune before sleep, Christian froze. It was the same melody Samantha used to hum when she was lost in thought. He searched his closet and found an old music box, its song identical. When he wound it, the notes filled the room like Samantha's voice whispering from another time. "You were always meant to find her." That night, Christian did not check his emails. He did not review market forecasts. He sat beside Lily until she drifted into sleep, her hand curled around the teddy bear that had followed her through storms. And in the quiet glow of the city lights, he faced the truth. The life he had built so carefully was already collapsing, not in failure, but in transformation. He had spent years running from hearts, only to discover the one heart that could no longer be ignored was sitting just a few steps away. Christian was a man used to control, but nothing about the days that followed felt within his grasp. His life had been governed by schedules, precise meetings, polished routines.
Thank you.
Now every moment seemed unpredictable. A little girl with mismatched socks was in his home, moving softly through rooms that had never known the sound of small footsteps. At first, he felt clumsy, almost foreign in his own space. He watched Lily perch on the oversized couch, her legs too short to reach the floor, the teddy bear never leaving her grip. He stood awkwardly nearby, arms crossed, as though posture could shield him from the unfamiliar weight pressing against his chest. When Nancy returned with additional documents, she spoke gently but firmly. "She needs stability, Mr. Miller. She needs someone who will not disappear." Christian nodded, though every part of him screamed he was unprepared. Yet something inside him whispered that he had already begun, even if he did not know how. That evening, he tried to cook. The result was burnt grilled cheese and soup far too salty. But Lily giggled softly at his clumsy attempts. She insisted on showing him how to flip the sandwich properly. Her small hands guided his larger ones on the spatula. And for the first time in years, Christian laughed at himself. They ended up eating on the living room rug, paper towels as placemats, crumbs scattered like confetti. It was imperfect, messy but alive. The next morning, he declined his driver for the first time in years. He slid into the driver's seat of his silver Audi, heart pounding as though he were facing a storm. The destination, Tacoma, Samantha's old neighborhood. He needed to understand the life she had built for Lily without him. Every street he drove felt like a reminder of choices avoided, doors unopened. Back in Seattle, Lily adjusted slowly to his penthouse. She walked carefully through its glossy hallways, as though afraid to disturb its sterile perfection. Christian noticed how wrong it looked a child, surrounded by cold marble and silent machines. One evening, she asked timidly, "Can I make something?" She climbed onto a stool and scrambled eggs with too much salt. But when he took a bite, it felt like a gift. Later that night, she chose a book from the small shelf he had stocked in her room, Charlotte's Web. Her mother used to read it, she explained, though often fell asleep before the best parts. Christian sat stiffly at first, his voice too quick. But when Lily laughed at Wilbur's panic, he slowed. He adjusted his tone, pausing between sentences. By the second chapter, her head had leaned against his shoulder. He could not remember the last time someone had rested against him without asking for anything in return. The following day, he took her to the pediatrician. The doctor confirmed she was healthy but noted subtle signs of fatigue and emotional strain. "She needs routine," the doctor said pointedly. "And someone who stays." The words carved into him deeper than any business deal could. Christian began trying. He shopped for colorful sheets, a star projector lamp, beanbags, a fuzzy pink rug. He filled a cart with items that felt ridiculous next to his usual minimalist tastes. When he returned, Lily's eyes lit up. She hugged a stuffed dolphin tightly and announced, "His name is Star." That single moment felt more valuable than any contract he had ever signed. His assistant Rachel arrived one afternoon, balancing folders and coffee. She stopped short when she saw the half-furnished child's room. "Who are you?" she teased, "and what have you done with Christian Miller?" He muttered something about evolving, and she smirked. "Evolution's messy. Don't give the dolphin a key to your apartment." But Christian knew the truth. He had no idea what he was doing. And yet, Lily's presence compelled him to learn. That evening, after another chaotic dinner attempt, Lily fetched her sketchbook. She showed him page after page of flowers, clouds, and childish scribbles. Then, one drawing stopped him cold. A man's face, square jaw, weary eyes. Beneath it she had written, "The man Mommy told me about." It was unmistakably him. Later, Christian tucked her into bed, though he had no proper sheets yet. She clutched Mr. Spruce, her teddy bear, and whispered, "Mom said bedtime stories help you remember you're not alone." He swallowed hard, managing only a tight smile. Hours after she slept, Christian sat alone in his study. The documents Nancy left glared up at him. He scheduled meetings, fielded calls, reviewed contracts, but none of it mattered. For the first time in decades, his mind was not on market projections. It was on a child's voice asking if she could stay until the rain stopped. Days blurred, each filled with small firsts, teaching her how to make hot chocolate, listening to her hum the melodies Samantha once did, noticing her pendant necklace engraved with the old Spruce Tech logo. He asked where she got it. "Mom gave it to me. Said it belonged to someone who helped change the world but forgot how to smile." Her words pierced him. He had spent years building walls of glass and steel, convincing himself that joy was optional, connection unnecessary. Yet here was proof that even in his absence, Samantha had kept him alive in stories and symbols. Each night, as Lily wandered from room to room, she left traces behind. Socks under the couch, crumbs on the counter, faint laughter that softened the cold edges of the penthouse. For years, Christian had treated silence as a companion. Now, silence felt unbearable unless it held her presence. One evening, after she fell asleep, he found himself staring at the city skyline. The lights blinked across the stormy sky, indifferent to his turmoil. But he no longer wanted their cold approval. For the first time, he felt the weight of what truly mattered to a child who needed him not as a provider of wealth, but as a father who would stay. Christian realized with dawning clarity that everything he had once thought permanent was temporary. His company, his fortune, his carefully crafted solitude. What endured was the chance standing in front of him, small and vulnerable, asking for something simpler than any deal he had ever negotiated. Love that stayed. It was terrifying, overwhelming, and unfamiliar. But for the first time in his life, Christian did not want control. He wanted to learn how to be the man Samantha believed he could be, the man Lily deserved. And in those early days of clumsy breakfasts, awkward bedtime stories, and fragile trust, Christian began the slow, unsteady journey of fatherhood. A journey not built on success or certainty, but on presence, on showing up again and again until the walls around his heart finally began to crack. Christian had built his entire empire on choices fast, sharp, decisive, but nothing in his life had ever felt as difficult as the decision now before him. On one side was Zurich, a merger worth billions, a deal that could expand his company across continents. On the other side was a little girl with tired eyes who sat at his breakfast table, pushing cereal around with the back of her spoon. He had always known the rhythm of negotiations, the cadence of corporate war rooms. But this rhythm was new, fragile, and far more terrifying. It was the rhythm of fatherhood, a tempo that demanded patience, consistency, and presence rather than strategy. When Leslie, his CFO, pressed him in the boardroom, "We need you on the Zurich flight, Christian." 48 hours until the deal closes, he stared at the polished table and saw only Lily's face. The echo of her small voice came back to him. "Can I sit here until the rain stops?" He shook his head slowly. "I'm not flying to Zurich." The silence that followed felt like glass shattering. Executives leaned forward on their screens, some visibly stunned, others visibly angry. "Excuse me?" Leslie demanded. "I won't lead this phase of the merger," he repeated. "I'll advise, but I can't leave." The room erupted in murmurs. For years, Christian had been the immovable pillar of Spruce Tech. To hear him walk away, even temporarily, felt like heresy. "You built this company from nothing," one executive accused, "and now you're stepping back for a child you didn't even know existed last week?" Christian's jaw tightened. "Yes." The words were simple, but they carried more conviction than any quarterly speech he had ever given. For the first time, Christian wasn't speaking as a CEO. He was speaking as a father. That evening, he left the skyscraper with no sense of loss. Instead, he felt as though he had taken his first honest breath in years. At home, Lily was quiet, curled on the couch, her teddy bear wedged under her chin. He recognized the silent Sina, the kind that filled his penthouse for years, but the silence of a child testing the waters of trust. Tessa's words, spoken days earlier, echoed in his mind. "She's waiting to see if love stays this time." Christian sat down beside her. "I was busy before," he admitted softly, "but not today, not anymore." Her eyes flickered with something fragile hope or disbelief he couldn't tell. He raised his hand solemnly. "Scout's honor. Even though I never made it past Webelos." A smile broke across her face, small but real.
Yes, I can.
The next day, he found himself in the back of the school auditorium for storytelling day. The space buzzed with chatter and the shuffling of parents. Christian felt out of place, dressed in a charcoal blazer over a plain t-shirt, a pink lunchbox tucked awkwardly under his arm. When Lily walked onto the stage, tiny in the spotlight, his chest tightened. She held a sheet of blue paper, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. "My story is called The Door," she began. "Once there was a girl who knocked on a big, scary door. Behind it lived a man she didn't know, but her mom said he used to be kind even if he forgot. She was scared he wouldn't open it, but when he did, love came out." The audience grew still, every eye fixed on her. Christian's throat burned as she continued. "I used to think my family was lost, but maybe he was just late getting here." By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Parents dabbed at cheeks. Teachers whispered to each other. Christian rose before he could think, walking straight down the aisle. Lily blinked at him, startled. He knelt on stage, arms open. She ran into them without hesitation, burying her face against him. Turning to the audience, his voice broke but did not falter. "My name is Christian Miller, and I am honored to be Lily's father." Applause thundered, echoing off the walls. Some stood, some cried. For Christian, it felt less like a declaration and more like a vow. That evening, he walked Lily home between himself and Tessa. Her small hands fit snugly in theirs, swinging with each step. The city felt different, less imposing, more alive. "I missed the Zurich flight," he said to Tessa. "I figured."
Wow.
She smiled. "You picked the better seat." Christian looked at her, surprised by the warmth in her gaze. "I think," he said slowly, "I want to build something new.
Well, that's
not just a
certainly
company, a life, a family." Tessa squeezed his hand gently. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Later, back at the penthouse, Lily asked the question that pierced him deeper than any boardroom confrontation ever could. "Do I get to stay forever?" Christian
All
knelt,
that morning,
meeting her
Wilbur stayed
eyes.
inside,
Yes,
feeling lonely.
forever and then some. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time since she had arrived. She whispered, "Good.
And the
Mom
stars
said
began
you'd
to
find
twinkle
your way."
like diamonds
And as he
in the
tucked her in
velvet
that night,
sky.
Christian realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the future. He wasn't afraid of hearts anymore. The transformation of Christian Miller's life did not happen with one decision, one hug, or one declaration. It happened in small, almost imperceptible ways that gathered strength until the man who once hid behind walls of glass could no longer recognize himself. The penthouse, once a monument to sterility and
These are
silence,
some signs of
began
fatigue,
to
and
change.
you need to keep a little
First,
bit
it
more
was a
stability.
single drawing taped to the refrigerator, then socks abandoned
Okay,
under the coffee
That's a
table,
good plan.
then the faint smell of grilled cheese lingering in the air long after dinner. These little disruptions should have irritated him. Instead, they became proof of something he had never allowed himself to believe possible. His home was no longer empty. Weekends were no longer filled with endless work. Saturday mornings turned into pancake competitions. Lily liked hers shaped like hearts, while Christian attempted dinosaurs that inevitably collapsed into shapeless blobs. She laughed anyway, her laughter sharp and bright, filling the penthouse in ways stock prices never could. Sometimes Tessa joined, hair loose, sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes with a confidence that made him wonder how many storms she had already weathered in her own life. One afternoon, Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Can we plant something? A real tree?" Christian blinked. He had never planted anything in his life, but her request was not about gardening, was about roots, about permanence, about something that stayed. Together they visited a nursery and chose a cherry blossom sapling. Lily named it Samantha. When they dug into the soil at the community garden,
What?
Lily wore overalls, her small hands covered in dirt.
Baby's room.
Christian, in jeans for the first time in years, pressed his
No.
palms into the earth beside her. Tessa snapped photos on an old Polaroid, capturing the unlikely trio bent over the soil. When Lily placed a small plaque at the base, "Mommy, you're still growing," in us, Christian had to look away, swallowing the ache in his throat. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, she surprised him again. She crept
is
into
the
the
man
hallway
with the
with an
tired
envelope
eyes.
tucked into her small hands. "Mom said to give you this when I could call you Daddy without being scared."
That is the
Inside
man
was
my
a simple
mother described.
photograph, a composite that merged his face with Samantha's, standing behind a younger Lily. Beneath it, in Samantha's handwriting, "Now make it real." Christian
Tell me
pressed the
another
photo to
story,
his chest,
please.
unable to breathe. Beneath it was another note. "If Lily trusts you enough to say Daddy, then you are already the man I always believed you could be. Forgive me. Forgive yourself. Build her the life I couldn't." He stood in the hallway for a long time, the paper trembling in his hands. Then he
Daddy?
walked into Lily's room. She was doodling on the floor, head bent, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. "Hey," he said softly, "quick question." She looked up, curious. He knelt and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with the word "Forever." His voice cracked as he asked, "Will you let me be your forever dad?" Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really?" She flung herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. "Yes, yes." From the doorway, Tessa watched
that's how
quietly,
the little bear
one hand
found his
pressed to
way
her
home.
heart. In the days that followed, Christian began making choices that were no longer about profit margins but about legacy. He launched a scholarship fund in Samantha's name, the Andrews Initiativer, single mothers pursuing STEM careers. He opened a wellness center in West Seattle, offering therapy for families rebuilding after loss. Rachel, after pretending not to cry during the announcement, signed on as operations coordinator. Tessa agreed to be the education advisor.
We must
It
find a life
wasn't
deserved
perfect.
you. It is our
There were
top priority.
tantrums,
This
sleepless
agreement will
nights,
secure our
and
future.
spilled
Yeah,
juice
let's make it
across
happen.
marble counters.
No,
But the house was alive with laughter.
I don't think I'll
Lily
be going on
adopted
that
a
trip
rescue
after all.
dog she named Comet, who sprawled
will
across
not
the
back down.
couch as if he had always belonged there. Christian
cannot
learned
be
how to make
serious.
tacos without burning them.
I
He
am
even
not
wore
leaving.
glitter once, courtesy
stay
of
with
Lily's
you.
art project. And through it all, he felt something he had not felt in years purpose. Not the kind found in headlines or Forbes lists, but the kind that anchored him to the present. One evening, when Lily was at a sleepover, Christian and Tessa walked along the waterfront. The air was cool, the city lights shimmering across the water. "You know," he said, "I thought I'd die in that
Welcome to
penthouse
Pancake Making
alone,
101.
surrounded by glass and
Are
silence."
you ready for this?
Tessa glanced at him with a soft smile.
So
"Now
good.
look at you,
Yeah, these are
pancake master, tree planter, wearer of glitter." He chuckled, but his voice grew serious. and
Can we
maybe
get
something
this one
else.
right here?
He stopped walking,
can.
pulled a small ring from his pocket and held it out. Tessa Navarro, would you consider continuing this mess with me forever? Her breath caught. He saw the tears before she laughed. Yes, I'd love to. Back home, Lily waited by the window. When she saw them, she squealed, ran for her camera, and snapped a photo. Say cheese! Family cheese! That picture would later take its place on the wall beside Samantha's memory. A new chapter standing alongside the old. A year later, the penthouse no longer felt like a tower of isolation. The glass walls remained, but now they were decorated with rainbow clings and drawings. Beanbags replaced cold leather chairs, shelves filled with children's books, Polaroids, and souvenirs from family outings. Comet sprawled in the middle of it all, snoring loudly.
Here.
Christian stood in front of the mirror one morning, adjusting a boutonniere on his jacket. Tessa, in a soft blue dress with cherry blossom pins in her hair, teased him about his nerves. In the next room, Lily twirled in her white dress, holding up a drawing of 3 figures under a rainbow, a man smiling, a woman with music notes around her, and a little girl between them. Beneath, in glitter, she had written, "My real family finally together." Christian knelt to hug her. "You nailed it, kiddo." And as she skipped away, the truth struck him with a force more powerful than any storm.
Forever?
He had once thought love was something he could lock away, something too dangerous to touch.
Yes, I understand.
But love had returned in the form of a little girl who knocked on his door, carrying both grief and hope in her small hands. Now, he no longer feared hearts. He carried one in his arms. 1 year after the night, a little girl knocked on his door. Christian Miller no longer lived in a fortress. His penthouse still rose above Seattle. Glass walls still framed the skyline, but the echo inside had disappeared. In its place were sounds he had once thought he would never know again. Laughter, the bark of a golden retriever named Comet, the rustle of pages as Lily read aloud from her favorite books. The transformation was not sudden, nor was it perfect. There were still days when Christian struggled, when guilt crept into his chest like an old phantom. But every morning, he was reminded that love had a way of teaching patience. A crayon drawing taped to the refrigerator, socks scattered across the floor. The faint hum of Tessa singing while she cooked all of it reminded him he was no longer alone. Lily had flourished in ways that startled him. At school, her teachers praised her resilience, her ability to see light where others saw shadows. She brought home drawings that told their story: a tree planted for her mother, a teddy bear under a rainbow, a man learning how to smile again. Each sketch was a reminder of how far they had all come. But it was not only Lily who had grown. Christian himself had become someone he barely recognized. A man who once measured worth in stock prices now measured it in bedtime stories and pancake breakfasts. A man who once avoided feelings now sat cross-legged on the rug while his daughter braided glitter into his hair. There were still moments when Samantha's absence hit hard. At night, Christian often read her blog entries again, every line a window into the years he had lost. But now, instead of collapsing under the weight of regret, he let her words guide him. She had believed he could become the man Lily needed. And little by little, he was proving her right. The penthouse,
so pretty.
once stark and minimalist, had transformed. Beanbags and stuffed animals littered the living room. Fairy lights twinkled in Lily's bedroom. Comet left paw prints on marble floors Christian no longer bothered to polish away. He even stopped caring about fingerprints on the glass walls. Each smudge was evidence that life finally pulsed inside. Saturday mornings had become sacred. Pancake battles continued, Lily perfecting her heart shapes while Christian's dinosaurs still collapsed into blobs. Tessa laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks. Sometimes, neighbors joined for impromptu barbecues, filling the rooftop terrace with voices and warmth. Christian marveled at how quickly loneliness had been replaced by community. One spring afternoon, they returned to the community garden where they had planted the cherry blossom tree named Samantha. Its branches now stretched wider, blossoms scattering pink petals into the breeze. Lily ran to it, hugging the trunk as though it were her mother's arms. Christian knelt beside her, brushing soil from his hands. "She's still here," Lily whispered. Christian nodded, unable to speak. Life was not flawless. There were sleepless nights when Lily had nightmares, times when she asked questions about her mother that left Christian scrambling for words. There were days when work still pulled at him, tempting him to retreat into old habits. But now, instead of hiding, he leaned on Tessa, on Rachel, on the family he had chosen, and the one that had chosen him. The moment that crystallized it all came at Lily's school art showcase. The gymnasium buzzed with chatter, walls lined with colorful projects. Christian and Tessa sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly. When it was Lily's turn, she walked nervously to the microphone. "My name is Lily Andrews Miller," she began, her voice shaking but steadying as she continued. "And once upon a time, I knocked on a door. I thought it was the scariest thing I'd ever do. But when it opened, love came out." Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by silence so deep it seemed to hold its breath. Christian felt tears welling as she went on. "I didn't know if family was something you found or something that found you. But now I do. Family finds you. Love finds you." The audience erupted in applause, some parents openly weeping. Christian rose without thinking, walking straight to the stage. Lily's eyes widened as he knelt and wrapped her in his arms. Then, turning to the crowd, his voice steady but full, he said, "I am honored to be Lily's father." The room shook with applause, and in that moment, Christian felt the final chains of his old life fall away. That evening, as they walked home under the streetlights, Lily skipped between Christian and Tessa, holding their hands. She looked up and asked, "Do I get to stay forever?" Christian knelt, meeting her gaze. "Yes, Lily, forever and then some."
It sure is.
Her smile lit up the
Let's
night.
come back tomorrow.
"Good," she whispered. "Mom said you'd find your way." Back at the penthouse, the three of them danced barefoot in the kitchen to a Taylor Swift song playing softly in the background. Comet barked, chasing after them, his tail wagging furiously. It was messy, chaotic, imperfect, but it was real. Later, as Lily slept beneath the glow of fairy lights, Christian stood at the balcony. The city shimmered before him, vast and indifferent, but he no longer felt alone within it. He felt anchored by a child who had knocked on his door, by a woman who had believed in him even after death, by a new love who had walked beside him without asking him to be anyone other than himself. And as he glanced at the cherry blossom tree swaying in the night breeze, petals drifting like quiet promises, he knew this was what he had been searching for all along. Not power, not wealth, but love that stayed. For the first time in his life, Christian Miller felt whole. Sometimes the most powerful transformations begin not with thunder, not with fireworks, but with a quiet knock on a door. Christian Miller had all the wealth, all the prestige, all the power a man could want, yet his life was hollow, his heart locked away. And then came Lily, a little girl carrying nothing but a teddy bear, a letter, and the memory of a mother's love. Her words, "Mom just died, you're my dad," cracked open a world Christian had sealed shut for years. What followed was not easy. It was awkward dinners, burnt sandwiches, sleepless nights, and questions that carried more weight than boardroom deals ever could. But it was also laughter, bedtime stories, and the quiet trust of a child who believed in second chances. Slowly, brick by brick, Christian built something he had never dared to before home. Not a penthouse, not a fortress, but a place filled with warmth, imperfection, and love. Samantha's memory lingered through music boxes, blog entries, and whispered promises, reminding him that love never truly disappears, it only waits to be found again. Through Lily's resilience and Tessa's steady presence, Christian discovered that true success is not measured in mergers or headlines, but in the courage to stay, to show up, to love without condition. And that is the heart of this story. That redemption is possible, that healing can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that even the coldest hearts can be warmed by the smallest hands. If this story has touched you, if it reminded you that love can return when you least expect it, I invite you to be part of our journey. Subscribe to Loss and Healing, where we share stories that inspire, heal, and remind us all of the power of second chances. Because sometimes all it takes is one brave knock to change everything.